What happened? I've been singing the praises of X and Pearl since they came out, but especially recently since I covered both of those movies in anticipation of Maxine, the third entry in this franchise that is maybe or maybe not concluding the series. This was one of those movies that I kind of just assumed was going to be good because of how much I enjoyed the last two, and since it's all the same creative team behind it, I was fully confident that even if it wasn't the best of the trilogy, I would still have a damn good time with it. I really like Ti West movies. I adore X, and I think Pearl is a fantastic character study, so I'm surprised to say that I didn't really enjoy Maxine much. Now let me clarify here, I'm not saying that this is terrible or anything like that, and I've talked to a few people who were much happier with the movie so I may be in the minority here, but I was honestly very caught off guard by how messy, unfocused, and unsatisfying this was, and especially in the way the thematic material was handled, because that was the thing that really set those last two movies apart for me, particularly X. This was definitely not the tone of video I was expecting to make today. Maxine follows the sole survivor of what is now deemed the Texas porn star massacre, as if the Texas Chainsaw homages in X weren't already clear enough, who's now gone on to become a successful actor in the adult film industry but is looking to break through into the upper levels of Hollywood. And as she pursues this dream, her past comes back to haunt her while a serial killer stalks the streets of LA at night. One of the things that I was looking forward to with this movie was the stylistic approach, because all three of these movies were set up to be very creatively distinct and heavily stylized, and that certainly continues to be the case here. X was akin to something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Pearl was a darker twist on The Wizard of Oz, and now with Maxine we're getting more of a giallo-style slasher mystery. And once again, West approaches this style with so much care and attention that it often just straight up feels like you're watching a movie that was made in the 80s. Like, it's so clear that West has such a deep understanding of what gives movies from a given era their tone, and he's able to recreate those elements so well and so effectively while also keeping things fresh and giving his own spin on things. I will say, I think that because the last number of years have been so saturated with 80s nostalgia flicks that are recreating a similar tone to what this is going for, it did feel less engaging as a stylistic decision here. That's not a knock against the movie or how well the tone is realized or anything, it's just that we're a lot more used to seeing these neon glowing 80s movies, so it doesn't quite stand out as much when contrasted by Pearl in particular, which was done in a style that is absolutely not done very often. This is a very vibrant looking movie with some really cool editing decisions, which has been something that I've enjoyed about this whole trilogy. X had those off-putting scene transitions where it would jump back and forth between the two scenes before finally settling in. Pearl had the engaging use of color grading reflecting Pearl's mindset, as well as the very trippy sequence at the end, and Maxine has some fun collage style scenes that do add a lot to the movie's flair. Mia Goth. Man, she's always so damn good. I don't think her performance here is going to be quite as memorable or impactful as it was in Pearl, but her reprising her role as Maxine here was an absolute treat to watch, and she of course nails every second behind it. It's been a while since the events of X, and you can tell she's been hardened by it, and she does not put up with any shit, like, at all. Ow. There's been a lot of time passed since we last saw the character, and Mia Goth does a lot of heavy lifting for helping to fill in that lost time and make things feel more cohesive. I would say that she completely owns every scene she's in. If Kevin Bacon didn't come back to the horror genre fucking swinging as this private investigator who was such a fun character. I won't get into the role he plays in the story because that's getting into spoiler territory, but the dude is just incredible here, delivers an electric performance. In terms of the story itself, there's some fun murder mystery going on throughout as Maxine works her way into what could be her big break, but what I was mostly enjoying about the story was the way that the events of X continue to haunt her to this day, where some of the style or musical motifs from that movie will bleed into certain moments when she's reminded of it or thinking back on what happened. It was a really cool way of weaving the stories together, which was a concern of mine going in. X and Pearl did feel very different, but because they shared the same set for the most part, there was a lot of connective tissue that still made them feel like they existed within each other's worlds. And I was worried that with the completely new setting and a significant time jump that moves Maxine's character forward pretty far from where we last saw her that this movie was going to feel disconnected from the other two. In some ways, it definitely does feel a bit like that, but there are some strong elements that help to connect it a bit more, even if it doesn't always work as well as I'd hoped. The movie's got a fun cast of characters, the performances are really solid, the style is super well realized with a lot of detail, and it does continue to carry on with the thematic side of pursuing your dreams and the cost that can come with. But I just found the overall execution of so much of this story to either be really uninteresting, lacking the depth that came before, or just straight up messy, especially once we get into the third act, which I was genuinely shocked by, but not in a good way. The amount of loose threads in this story makes me think that they were meant to be part of the way that it was all meant to like subvert expectations and throw you off, since it's a mystery movie, but it never felt like I was on this wild and mysterious ride of intrigue. It just felt like there were a bunch of awkward tangents that were meant to pull my attention in one direction, but never really succeeded in creating the questions I think they were meant to. I also didn't find that there were enough seeds planted to make me wonder what was going on. I just wasn't all that interested in trying to piece together the mystery playing out because it didn't feel like I was being asked to or given much that would make me want to start trying to connect any dots. I was sort of just along for the ride, waiting for the eventual reveal, which, I don't know, I just didn't find the mystery elements of the story to be very engaging, and when that's such a huge focus of the narrative, it can then make the whole thing feel a little like floaty, if that makes any sense. I guess it just felt like there was a lot of wheel spinning going on without a ton of substance to fill in the time between narrative beats. Now, of course, without spoiling anything, when we get to the third act of this movie and information starts getting revealed, this is where the movie really fell apart for me. I was already pretty iffy about the story, but this third act is so choppy and unfocused and unsatisfying without any of the payoff I was hoping to see after the last two movies, and most of the things that I did like about the third act were already done in X, so it felt a little redundant. There's been humor present in the trilogy the whole time, but this third act gets so silly that I was just completely taken out of the experience. This entry as a whole, it leans a lot more into humor than the last two did, and I didn't find that it worked as well overall, but that's especially how I felt during the movie's conclusion. On top of that, it's one of those endings where I thought the credits were gonna roll like 3 scenes in a row, so those final few minutes wound up feeling really choppy to me, and while it does close off on a way that feels very appropriate thematically for the trilogy, I feel like the way the message was delivered was too heavy-handed and didn't offer anything unique when it comes to stories about following your dreams. So while I can appreciate the spirit behind what was happening, it didn't land the way I was hoping it would. Yeah, I don't know. I have a feeling that I'm probably gonna be in the minority of fans that wasn't happy with this chapter, but I honestly walked away unsatisfied with the way the story unfolded, and I didn't find this to leave the same impression that X and Pearl did. When those movies rolled credits, I felt like I'd just seen something really substantial, and especially with X, I just wanted to keep going back to piece together more of the underlying details, but here, I don't really have much of an urge to revisit it. Again, it's not a terrible movie or anything. I think it's overall fine, but that's about all I felt about it. And with the bar being set so high by the last two movies, a fine ending wasn't really what I was expecting. As I've said to everyone who reached out to me and asked what I thought, I hope you enjoy it more than I did. And there really is a lot to like here, but I think it's just ultimately not my kind of movie. I can't win them all. Anyway, I think that's gonna be, about all I have to say about it for now. Longlegs is out next week, and I absolutely cannot wait to see that one and share my thoughts on it. But until then, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.